welcome. You are listening to another episode of the Business of Aesthetics podcast series, brought to you by our gold sponsors, MRP, Laser Uptech, and Equa Marketing. We also want to thank our silver sponsors, Lendiala, Eilis Works, and Pronox. If you would like to network and share your experience with our podcast guests and other aesthetic industry professionals, join our Facebook or LinkedIn communities by searching for Business of Aesthetics. Today we're going to be speaking with one of the finest experts in aesthetics.
Get ready for an extraordinary opportunity. You're invited to join our exclusive monthly webinar, brought to you by the Aesthetic Institute and the Business of Aesthetics community. Don't let this chance slip through your fingers. Secure your spot now for a game-changing experience. Explore the details on our homepage at www.businessofesthetics.org and get set to transform your strategies.
So hello, my name is Dana Zeitler, and I'm a physician assistant owner of a med spa in Naples, Florida. I am excited to be hosting today's episode of Business of Aesthetics. And today I have the honor to have with me a personal mentor in aesthetics, Dr. Michael Kelly. He is founder and medical director of Skin Lab Atlanta. He's double board certified in plastics and general surgery. He practiced in Miami for over 25 years. And was the founder of Miami Plastic Surgery. So welcome, Dr. Kelly. Please tell us a little bit more about you, what led you to where you are now in your journey in Atlanta, and any tips, any tricks, any insight into scaling a practice, building it up, selling it, and where you are now.
Well, thank you, Dana. It's a pleasure to be here with you. As always, and congratulations on hosting your new gig. I started my practice back in '92 in Miami, and started as a one-man shop with one employee and one computer, and we gradually grew to the point where we had 31 employees and 3 offices. So it's been a pretty interesting journey, and now we're starting on a new phase, but I think there's a few things I learned along the way that may be helpful to some of your listeners.
Yeah, I would love for you to share, a little more insight on, scaling, I guess, hiring, bringing on partners, when you decided to do that, and, when you decided that you were going to start really cutting back your ownership or percentage in your practice to make it ready for sale.
Sure. I had what was a pretty traditional path when I first started, and I did, mostly reconstructive surgery with a small amount of cosmetic surgery, and then the cosmetic part of it grew gradually. By 1999, I had gotten 3 partners, and we formed a new practice called Miami Plastic Surgery, and that continued to grow. We built a couple operating rooms, and we gradually became what I think was the premier plastic surgery practice in Miami. In 2013, I had what I call the light bulb moment when I realized someday I'm going to want to sell this practice, and no one's going to want to buy it if I'm making 40% of the revenue of the practice, because if I leave, what are they buying? So I realized that I had to make myself irrelevant to the cash flow of the practice. And the way I did that was through expansion. We built our first satellite office in 2013. We added another plastic surgeon and another esthetician and a PA. And we made it more of a med spa focus without doing surgery there. And within 3 months, that was cash flow positive. I always considered that the experiment. And then we did it again a year later. And it was, again, within 3 months, it was cash flow positive. So that was the confirmation. By the time 2018 rolled around, I had grown the revenue from $5 million to $11 million. And meanwhile, I had originally been 40% of the revenue, and I had shrunk that down to 11%. So I had achieved my goal of making myself irrelevant, And then we put the practice on the market, and we were able to sell it in the third quarter of 2018. And it was a great experience.
So how did you match with sellers, and what were you looking for to find the ideal seller that, was in alignment with your goals as a practice?
Right. So we hired an investment banker, which I would highly recommend, who they really turned our practice into a book, basically, that described what we did. It was about 80 pages long, and they shipped that out to both private equity groups as well as platforms that were roll-ups of different practices. And at that time, back in 2018, there really wasn't a lot of interest in plastic surgery practices. The focus was more on dermatology. But one group in particular stood out, Derm Care, which was run by a guy named Jeffrey Schillinger. He saw that the synergy there could be between plastic surgery and dermatology, and hired us. And I think we were probably one of the first or second plastic surgery practices in the country to be bought. And at that point, Derm Care was very new. I think we were the sixth practice they bought. They have about 60 practices now. They've really grown. But it really worked out well because we could refer general derm patients to them, and they could send cosmetic patients to us. So it was a strong move on their part, and it was a great process for us, both from a financial standpoint, but just more importantly, I think also in a compatibility standpoint. We weren't necessarily looking to have the highest bidder. We wanted to have someone that we thought we'd be able to have a good partnership in the years to come, and it worked out very well.
Yeah. How long did the buyout process take, and then how long did you have to stay on afterwards as part of that?
Yeah, I signed a 5-year employment agreement afterwards. The buyout process that's a roller coaster, and it's you're afraid things are going to fall apart. They're doing their due diligence. It took us maybe 9 months from start to finish till the check finally cleared. but it was it was great, and people said to me along the way, "Oh, you should just enjoy it." I didn't enjoy any minute of it. I was stressed the whole time, worrying that something was going to fall apart. But at the end of it all, we pulled it off, and I'm sure most people who are acquired go through a similar process. So it's not easy, but I'm glad I did it.
Yeah, I think that there are more and more private equity coming into the market and looking for medical spas to purchase. So I think that that's really valuable to the listeners of what that process looks like and how long it takes. And any advice that you would have for, I guess, what to look for in a buyer that, more than money, just about that alliance.
Sure. So I would, you would want to talk with other people who've been acquired by that particular buyer. Med spas are ideal because in general, they are very generic in the sense that they often don't depend on any one provider. So if you own a med spa and you've got 5 or 6 people working for you, if someone quits, somebody can take their place. They're still going to be attractive to a buyer. So that I think that's why there's so much interest in med spas. But yeah, talking with other people who've been acquired is important. I remember one anecdote where there was another buyer in the market, and they were looking to buy us as well. And we spoke with one of the groups they had acquired, and they were so unhappy. They said that the owner had required them to stop using Charmin in the bathroom and had gone to generic toilet paper, and they couldn't believe it. But you don't know who you're getting in bed with, right? And their standards are definitely going to be different than yours. I mean, it's harder to run 60 practices than it is to run one practice, and their focus is different. They're trying to create the systems to make everything work together. They're never going to run your business as well as you ran it yourself. I'm convinced of that. And there were definitely times after we were purchased where I had to say to myself, listen, they paid you a lot of money to buy your practice. They can run it any way they want, even when they were doing things which were not necessarily the things I would have done. But I think their perspective was different and their priorities were different. So I could understand why they were doing it, but I just didn't think that the practice was run as well as when I ran it. And I
Yeah,
think most people would probably have the same experience.
yeah, I think that's something really, interesting and something to think about for people that are selling their process, their practice, that usually they do, I think, require most owners stay on for a certain amount of time. I think that's pretty standard to, ease that transition. And they're the owner of your practice, and you're really the employee after you've been in charge. So I'm sure that that's challenging.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that definitely was the hardest part for me. But as I tell people, I would still do it all again.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about what is happening now in Atlanta. So you've moved to Georgia last year, correct?
Right. I moved up about a year ago, and I wasn't ready to retire. And I took a job with a dermatology group, Georgia Skin Cancer, um, just doing injectables. I'd stopped doing surgery. I still do minor procedures, but primarily doing injectables, Botox and fillers. Working 2 days a week for them. And it was great. I enjoyed the patient interaction. But, after my employment agreement, I really missed owning a practice and being in charge. I mean, there's certain people, that's their nature. And you know me, that's just kind of what I like doing. In addition to the clinical side, because I love taking care of patients, but I loved running my business at the same time. So SkinCeuticals had this new concept of the skin labs, and they've opened 10 of those around the country. They're in New York, LA, Miami. And I'd had a long association with them with my old practice. So they came to me when they found out that I'd moved to Georgia and asked me if I would open a skin lab for them in Atlanta. And even though that's like an hour and 15 minutes away from my home, I just couldn't resist the opportunity for a new challenge. The skin labs are
So yeah, tell me what exactly the concept is, because it sounds really interesting.
Yeah, I think, what they're doing is that they're making these retail storefronts, and they look like an Apple store. They're chrome and glass and very slick looking and very inviting. So you want to be in a place where there's high foot traffic, where there's a lot of shoppers, and people are walking by and they're looking in the window and they're like, SkinCeuticals, I thought you could only get those at the doctor's office or at a med spa. You mean I can buy these, right here on the street? And so it tends to draw people in. It's not, most people won't walk into a med spa and just say, hey, what do you sell here, right? But they'll walk into these stores, and then we do injectables, we do facials, we do laser treatments in the back. There's a therapeutic area in the back, but the draw is the products. There's for a lot of people, that's the first step in going into the store. And because of that, about 30% of the revenue of a skin lab comes from product sales, which is much higher than almost any med spa. And so, and those are, I know you have SkinCeuticals in your practice. They're great products, right? They sell themselves, and they're something that I can sell knowing they're clinically tested and recommend them to patients without hesitation. So it's a win-win, and SkinCeuticals has just been a great partner with me, and they partner with who they think are the best plastic surgeons and dermatologists in each community. So I'm really excited about that. We're actually under construction right now in Midtown, which is a very walkable area in downtown Atlanta, and we're going to open November 1st. And I've hired staff, and I'm just starting the whole journey all over again. And I'm really enjoying it. I was so bored and unhappy just working 2 days a week, and it's just so great to have a challenge again.
That's really cool. I'm so excited to hear, learn more about that concept, because SkinCeuticals kind of a forefront in the industry to see if, I hate to say others copy that, or if they're a copycat, because the concept of having lasers and injectables in the back and drawing people in with skincare is sort of genius. So
yeah,
it'll be really interesting to see what happens. That's
awesome.
really exciting.
Yeah,
So What are you doing differently with this adventure compared to Miami, like with the hiring process or just investors, staffing? I mean, anything different?
Well, it's all different. For me, I've learned a lot in the process, and I've found that a lot of the med spas in the Atlanta area, I think they treat their employees kind of like plug and play. Like they don't want them posting on Instagram. They don't want them getting followings. They try and pay them the least they can possibly pay them. And then they kind of churn through them. And when somebody doesn't work out or complains, they get rid of them and they just hire somebody else. And so there's a lot of turnover and a lot of unhappy staff. And that was never the way I ran my practice. I had employees that were with me. My administrator was with me 13 years. My patient coordinator was with me 23 years. My OR tech was with me 29 years. My philosophy was you paid people more and you kept them, because turnover is a killer for any business, and especially for a medical practice. People like to see the same faces there. So I've looked for people who had experience, who I thought were likable people, and I'm willing to pay them more than what the average med spa was making. And that's always worked for me in the past, and I think it will work for me there. I want to be, and I was the same way when I was in Miami. I want to be the quality shop. I'm not the low price shop. There's people who can only afford a Chevy, and that's great, and that's understandable. But we're Mercedes here, and not everybody can afford a Mercedes. But when you step into a Mercedes, you can sense that quality. You can sense that it's better, and that's what I want people to feel when they walk in the doors to the Skin Lab, right? And so I think we're going to do a better job. We're going to be worth that added cost, and they're going to get an experience that's better than what they're going to get at some of these generic med spas that are ostensibly our competitors, but really won't be, because we're just doing something different. That's my hope.
And you'll have the brand recognition as well with SkinCeuticals. And even if people don't recognize you right away, just because you're from Florida, they will soon realize how experienced you are. And, I guess it's 30 plus years. I thought it was 25, but it's a lot
Right.
more years. I mean, you've got the experience to back up of all, between the successes and the mistakes and doing it right this time. But I completely agree with you. If you treat your employees well, they'll be less likely to quit and look elsewhere. It's really important. But I love the whole concept. I'm super excited to see it. Is there a website where people can learn more about it?
Right now, our website is just being built. So if you Google Skin Lab Atlanta, it'll take you to the master website for all the skin labs, and you can learn about skin labs there. But our specific Skin Lab Atlanta website is not up and running yet.
Well, I'll make sure that I put in the bio with the podcast your Instagram, because I'm sure you'll be posting updates on your Instagram with the podcast, with the progress of the space. So that's exciting. So how many employees do you think you'll have?
Right now, I've hired 5 to start out, and we're built out to have 3 facial rooms, 2 injector rooms, and a laser room. So I hope to scale up over the next year. But my plan is to get we've hired 1 esthetician and get her maxed out before we hire our second one.
Are you yourself going to be injecting there, or we have other injectors?
I'm starting out. I'm going to inject. I really love injecting, and I've spent the last 2 years. I've learned a lot just doing only injecting instead of surgery. So again, from a cash flow perspective, it's much easier for me to do the injecting. I hope that I get busy, because I'm probably only going to do 2 days a week, and then we'll bring in another injector.
Cool. Well, that's super exciting. I'm really excited about this new venture. I think it's super smart. So, any other reflections about being an entrepreneur, and anything else that you can tell the listeners for, I guess there is this, you think you're going to retire and it's going to be vacations and tennis and golf, and then you get to that point and you want to do it all over again. So it sounds like you've really caught the bug, but I'd love some insight into any business advice for listeners.
Yeah, I mean, I think focus on quality, um, focus on relationships with yourself and your staff and your employees. Um, you want to make decisions based on the long term, not the short term. Um, I used to, there were procedures that patients would ask me to do, and you can sell anything, as a physician or as a PA. Patients are going to trust you, they're going to believe in you. And it's never smart to make the quick buck if you don't really believe that it's going to make a difference for a patient. One of my examples I used to say was all therapy. If someone needed a facelift or a neck lift, then I would tell them not to do all therapy in my practice because I knew they were going to be disappointed. I could have taken their money. I could have talked them into it. They would have all done it if I recommended it. But I would tell them they were better off. I said, either just save your money and do a facelift when you're ready, but don't pay the money for all therapy and be unhappy. I don't want that patient coming back, 6 months later, tell me how they spent a lot of money and they don't see any difference. There's not an upside to that. Everything we do we should have a reasonable expectation that they're going to get a great result with it, and always focus on that quality, focus on making sure your patients are happy.
No,
Um,
I agree. Patient first, put the patient first, what's in the best interest of the patient. Will you have a plastic surgery referral relationship set up in that area since you'll be doing just non-surgical procedures?
100%. I already know two plastic surgeons within a couple blocks of the skin lab, and I see patients every day. Even now, in my injector rollout at the lake where I'm working as an employee there, I see patients every day that I refer to plastic surgeons because just as well as I do, there's great things we can do with injectables, but some things demand surgery. And again, if somebody has big bags under their eyes, you're not going to fix that with an injectable. They need to have surgery. So there's things we can help, and there's things that really need to be treated with surgery. And part of our role is to decide what's best for the patient.
So one last question, I guess, because we're doing pretty good on time. Tell me about, the capital, or, how was there an investor for this? Is this SkinCeuticals, kind of the money behind this venture, or are you putting up capital to invest in this next?
I'm the owner. SkinCeuticals is a partner with me, but I own the practice. So I assume the risk. I signed the lease on the space. I borrowed money from the bank to invest in this. SkinCeutical contributes very nicely in terms of marketing. They hired a project manager to supervise the construction and also get bids so that it's built out to their standards because they want these skin labs to be the same. Because I've worked with SkinCeuticals for the past few years, I know what a great partner they are, and I trust everything they say, and they always keep their word, and it's been great. But some people would compare it to a franchise, but unlike a franchise, I don't have to I don't have to give them a percentage of my sales. There wasn't a franchise fee. My only obligation is that I can only sell SkinCeutical products in the skin lab. But other than that, it's pretty much I can run the shop the way that I want. They have signature treatments that they recommend, so we'll do those. But in terms of whether I inject Galderma products or Allergan products, that's totally up to me. If I want to buy a laser, if I want to do laser hair removal, those are all up to me. So it's really my shop. I can kind of run it the way I want within certain parameters.
Yeah, it sounds like an amazing partnership, and I have a feeling that there will be more skin labs to come around the country. So I think this is just the beginning.
And they've all been very successful starting out, and I've visited a number of them, and I'm really excited to see how this one works out.
Yeah. Well, any final thoughts for the listeners that on your experience?
Nothing other than saying that you're a great host, and I'm excited for your new chapter here, and they're lucky to have you.
Oh, thank you, Dr. Kelly. I appreciate that, and I appreciate your mentorship over the years, and I can't wait for the future also. So you have a wonderful day. And I will catch you hopefully after November to see what you're up to after it gets opened.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for joining us this week on the Business of Aesthetics podcast series, brought to you by our gold sponsors, MRP, Laser Uptech, and Equa Marketing, and silver sponsors, Lengia Law, Eilis Works, and Pronox. Would you like to join our growing group of aesthetic industry experts and get featured on the Business of Aesthetics podcast? Or do you know someone who would love to share their strategies for growth in the aesthetics business, providing quality patient care, or their clinical expertise? Head on over to www.businessofaesthetics.org/podcast/show and apply to be featured as a guest on the show. Remember to subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Google Play, Amazon Music, or wherever you listen. If you would like to engage with today's or any of our past speakers, join our Facebook group or LinkedIn group by searching for Business of Aesthetics. Thank you and have a great day.